Does the intelligence community ever fabricate threats to influence elections in the way that Tulsi Gabbard is saying has happened with the Russia collusion narrative?
Intelligence agencies not only have to manipulate the American public to prevent them from knowing the true significance of a threat that might be imminent, but they also have to manipulate the American public because manipulating the American public also manipulates foreign intelligence. If you tell something to an American publicly, you're telling it to every English speaker in the world. And that goes both ways. So if you omit a fact, then you're omitting the fact from foreign databases. Or if you tell an intentional falsehood, you're giving misinformation to foreign adversaries as well, right? That's the information warfare landscape that we live in, that we so often forget we live in.
Right. Okay, so we're being spun essentially at all times, and we have to be, according to what you're saying. So are they worried that we're going to panic if there's an imminent threat? Why spin us?
Because so mass psychosis is very real. What will happen in any given group is you'll have the majority of the group will simply react emotionally. Fear, sadness, outrage. They'll have an emotional response to an input, but they won't land on a decision. They won't land on an action step. A small subset of the group will land on an action set as well as an emotional set. But it's very difficult to predict what action the mass will not only adopt, but then pursue. So could it be peaceful protests in a park that they land on? Or could it be violent protests in the streets burning down businesses? The same input can yield both outcomes, but you don't really know which one it's going to be because it kind of boils down to the few people who have an action that they take and then the response of the masses to that action. Do they support or do they work against that action? And we've seen it in history time upon time upon time. Sometimes protests break out and businesses burn. Other time protests break out and nothing burns down. We've seen people self-police. We've seen people hold each other back. We've seen people push each other forward into arms of troops or into lines of fire. Like we've seen incredible things. Human beings are, for all their pros and cons, without a doubt, human beings are unpredictable.
What Tulsi Gabbard is putting forward is that this was a coup. So extremely high stakes. So it does seem like the sense that it was fabricated is going to be important. So fabricated does not feel accurate, or it just feels semantically off?
So it is semantics with a heavy dose of accuracy, I would say. Fabrication by definition among intelligence agencies means that it is invented truth. There is no foundation in it. If you think about it, you've basically got three types of information. Misinformation, which is mistaken or inaccurate information. Disinformation, which is intentionally falsified information. But then you also have a third category called malinformation or malicious information. Malinformation is real fact maliciously presented so that it can shape people's opinions. With the collusion accusations, what she's basically saying to a professional intelligence listener is that what was presented by the Biden administration was maliciously derived. Instead of taking the full body of evidence, they took a subcategory of that body of evidence, reached an analytical conclusion, and presented it to the American people in a way that painted Russian activity in the 2016 election at the worst. So what she's doing is essentially picking a different subcategory of the same base of information and then presenting it forward, also, some would accuse, in a malicious intent, to spin a positive story about Donald Trump. The truth is, in that body of evidence, you're going to have lots and lots of information. So a true analytical product should look at all information and create a probability index, as well as a veracity index, meaning what's the value of each piece of information. So you may only have one or two pieces of highly valuable information, meaning very high accuracy, very high level of truth. And those two pieces of information might be better than 50 pieces of conjecture. We don't know. No one is talking about that in the media. No one's saying whether or not the report she's pulling from XYZ is high fidelity or low fidelity, or whether the original analysis that was reached by CIA in 2018 was high fidelity or low fidelity. It's mixed. There's a muted element to the value of the information. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI is a presidential appointed position. And
why does that matter?
Because she's there to serve the president, as is Ratcliffe, the head of CIA, as is the entire CIA. They all serve under the executive branch. So they have one customer, and that one customer is the president. So what the president wants, the president gets.
In this landscape, how should we contextualize the fact that these are presidential appointees who theoretically serve at the pleasure of the president, though this accusation is very specifically that, you had one thing happen, which was a bleed over from Obama to Trump was actually used to undermine the president.
The thing we need to understand is that what we're seeing now isn't new. What we're seeing now has extended all the way back to 2003 with the creation of the DNI, and then even before that with all positions that were political appointee positions. The difference is that social media and the 24-hour news cycle and the modern era of contributory 24-hour news cycles and conjecture news cycles and pundits all over the place, information is more available than it's ever been. The fact that the president appoints people into positions of power that will benefit the president's ambitions and outcomes and goals, that's always been the case. That's always been the case as long as we've had presidential appointees. We just see it more now than we ever saw it before. It used to take us 2 years, 3 years before we realized, oh shit, that person's just there to put their stamp of approval on anything the president says. It used to take us years to see that. We see that now in weeks or days or before it even starts. That said, what Donald Trump has done a questionable job of is that he's put people into office in his most current administration that are clearly not qualified for the job, that are clearly there because they had some sort of pre-existing relationship with the president before he was the current president. That's something that, at least in the past, presidents have tried to obfuscate a little bit. They tried to pick someone who was a career diplomat, or they tried to pick someone who was in some sort of career category that was overlapping with the office that they sit in, right? But you're from RFK Jr. to Hegseth, each of their positions, everybody on both sides of the aisle look at that and say, this person doesn't have the quality. There's no way this person is the most qualified person in the country to sit in that role.
Should we be uniquely skeptical, maybe a better word? Should we be uniquely skeptical of Trump's appointees?
Yes, because when you look at recent history, the last time we saw essentially cronies that were not qualified for their position being put into the office that they were put into was Venezuela under Chavez. I'm not comparing Donald Trump to Chavez. I'm not saying we're destined for the same future as Venezuela.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
But I am saying we took a big step, a very big step, from the Biden, Kamala, whatever that disaster was, to where we are now in the fact that we've basically abandoned previous protocols for how we identify presidential appointees and moved into this era of pushing our appointees through nominations because we controlled the Congress.
All right, you were in CIA for 7 years, but you interacted with 5 different directors, which by the math is slightly unusual. So normally the tenure of a director is 3 years. This is looking at history since, I think, 1947 when the CIA was founded. You were dealing with either 1.4 or 1.8. I forget what the exact math was. It was about half of what a normal tenure is. And you, by the way, for anybody listening, you were gone a year before this whole scandal started taking place, for anybody who cares about that. But when you look at that, what was the protocol being used that created such a high turnover? Because I don't look at that and go, oh, we had a good system before and now we have something broken, though you are helping me understand this in a different light. But what was the methodology that was being used, whether it was by Biden, Trump 1, Obama? Like, how did they select?
The office of the director of CIA, I would categorize during my tenure at CIA, that office was being used as a place to check a box on an upward swing to other political utility. So part of the reason that we had so many directors in such a short period of time is because when I first joined, Director Hayden, who was a 4-star Air Force general, was the director of CIA. That is blatantly against the rules at the time. You're not supposed to be a uniformed military officer and also be in charge of a civilian government intelligence agency. But they had a carve out, they made an exception for General Hayden. So we were already kind of breaking the rules to put Hayden in place.
And who was president at that time? Bush?
Yes, it was Bush at that time. So, and Hayden had been there, and Hayden had been very successful by all accounts. And Hayden was well liked at CIA. So Hayden was well liked, and Hayden was replaced by Panetta. Panetta was purely political, right? Leon Panetta. After Leon Panetta left, he was replaced by Petraeus as a civilian. General Petraeus, who had led military forces in the Middle East, came on as a civilian.
So once again, we have a weird thing, or because he had exited the military, no beef?
It was no beef by policy, but it was still kind of unique that he was a career military general who then came in to lead the intelligence
Why do we
services.
look at that sideways? Why is that? Why should that be weird? It doesn't hit me as weird, only because I haven't thought about it.
Because you have civilian agencies for a reason. And then you have military groups, military organizations for a reason. The culture is totally different. The mindset is supposed to be different. The purpose is supposed to be different. When it comes to the military, they're there to follow orders without objection.
So when you see a military guy in a civilian organization, you should be paranoid that they're just following orders once again, that it's just so baked into their DNA that good luck avoiding it.
And why do you put a military person in charge of an organization? For the
Right.
same reason, right? And then you also should also, as a leader, understand that when you put a military voice in charge of a civilian organization, you're going to have a break between the organization and the leader, because that leader is not used to leading civilians. That leader's not used to the kind of motivational talents, the kind of holistic leadership that's needed to lead people who voluntarily serve.
You can't just tell them what to do.
Because you can't just, and
You've
there's
got
no
to bring them along.
there's no professional implication or no professional ramifications if they don't do what you tell them to do. It's not like the military where you could go to jail, where you can go under UCMJ
Very different, yeah.
for
fair.
saying no to an order, right?
Yeah.
And then the whole thing, there's this weird kind of back and forth with Mike Morrell, who's a career CIA officer who was a sitting director before he was pulled out of the sitting director seat to then become a full director.
So
by
what's
the end.
starting to break down? Like I remember when Trump came into office and people were like, he doesn't trust the intelligence community and he's now starting to use Peter Thiel's company, which I'm Palantir.
Yep.
And people were like, this is so weird. It sounds like something started breaking down much earlier. There's so much division between the left and the right that the agencies are starting to be weaponized against the other party to either keep them out of office. Like, is that what we see starting to happen? So these guys have an intuitive, like, give me a general, give me somebody that just follows orders. I'm gonna tell them what to do and they're gonna do it.
I don't think it's the weaponization of the intelligence services. It wasn't then. It may be going in that direction now for different reasons. But what I would say happened is that prior to the second term of Bush, the person in charge of CIA, the people put in charge of intelligence agencies, were there to serve the mission first. And that was
The
it.
mission, protect America.
Protect America, maximize intelligence collection, serve at the behest of the president to
Do
serve the
they
American people.
maximize intelligence collection for any reason other than to protect Americans?
No, they shouldn't have. They may have only if it was a presidential directive. And there's a whole carve out in the intelligence world for when the president finds something that matters to them. It's called a presidential finding. That finding can literally be given to CIA, and there's a blank check to pursue whatever the president's pet project is, usually with covert action. So there's a process for serving the president's pet projects, but generally speaking, by and large, you put someone in charge of an agency so that you can fire and forget that they're there, and they just keep the engine running like a CEO. What happened in the latter half of Bush and all the way through the years of Mike Morrell, which is 10 years of history, CIA became a box-checking activity for people who wanted to ride the coattails of other successful politicians, especially with Obama. When Obama took office, Obama was there on the promise of changing things. 2 years into his first 4-year term, he was realizing change isn't easy. So then he just started using executive orders and he started to force policy through a Congress that he controlled. He also was able to do that in the intelligence services.
Okay, so I want to restate what I think you're saying so you can either correct where I'm at or we'll just have it on the table. When you say that they're riding the coattails of a politician, it's really a loyalty play. It's like, hey, you want to keep going in this world.
Right.
So do me a favor, jump into intelligence, run the CIA, and then there's going to be rewards for you after that. And that's good for me as the president because now I know that the person doing the intelligence work for me, I can just say, go do this thing and they're going to do it.
But the loyalty was more to a party than to a person.
That makes sense.
So the Democratic Party has your back. Hey, the Republican Party has your back. All you do is you take this role, serve in it for 18 months to 2 years. It's going to look great on your resume. It's going to be perfect when you run for president 8 years down the road, 12 years down the road, 16 years down the road. So it was a box checking activity. This is very common in the military. When you know you're trying to build a future 2-star general, you start building them when they're a lieutenant colonel. Right? You start making sure they have the right items on their agenda, they sit in the right offices for the right period of time, and you move them up as quickly as possible. We have a term in the Air Force, it's called somebody on afterburners, right? The Navy has their own term, the Marine Corps has their own term. Doing the same thing in the intelligence sector. It's going to be much easier for the American public to vote for you when you're running for president if on your resume it says you were director of CIA. Look at George H.W. Bush, right? So that's what we were seeing. That's what happened. That's why Panetta took the job. That's why Petraeus took the job. Mike Morrell was the first one to not really have that kind of political ambition. He had an opportunity to do something that was totally different, but it was still politically party-oriented. What we're seeing now is a change to more individual loyalty rather than party loyalty. And a big part of that is because the Republican Party, let's not forget, did not support Donald Trump during his original run for president.
Given that we spent however many years building up a pipeline that was loyal to a party, it does feel like the scene is set for a party to go, okay, this guy's an outsider, everybody hates him, because for people forgetting, this is not Trump 2.0, this is what happened when Trump 1.0 got elected. It seems like the table is set for, cool, let's take him down. Let's use the tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that an outsider does not come in and disrupt what, at least from the left and the right, we can both agree on, which is that you need party loyal people. And so they're playing the same game. Trump comes along, he's playing a new game. Let's take him out. From a narrative perspective, it's very easy to swallow, but I'm also paranoid about facile narratives. So do you think that's what we're going to see play out in these indictments? Or will indictments ever come? Grand jury, I think, is active now. Or is this all just more spin on the behalf of Tulsi Gabbard?
I don't think we're going to see backlash. I don't think we're going to see anything get moved through the court system, especially not anything fast, going back to previous presidents. What I do think we're seeing
because there's nothing there, or because the whole system
the whole system
no
is,
way.
The whole system is not built for this. We don't have
this.
So we don't. First of all, we don't have an official judicial system, or we don't have an efficient.
You mean within? Oh, okay.
We don't have an efficient.
I was like, we don't have an official judicial system. What?
We don't have an efficient judicial system. And then part of the reason that we don't have an efficient system in any of our 3 branches of government is because our forefathers wanted us to move slowly, because they wanted to build. Arguably, they wanted to build in space for people to pop off, have emotional changes in the geopolitical landscape that wouldn't radically transform our country. So they wanted to build in that buffer space. The second thing is that we have to understand that Donald Trump and the Donald Trump administration, the reason they are consistently one step ahead of the traditional bureaucracy of government is because he moves at the speed of business. He understands how to move at the speed of economy. He understands how people think and how to market to the way that people think. So whereas narratives used to be created, no shit, narratives from government used to be created by the interns who worked for Congress people who would sit around in a big room with a coach at the front, and they would all shape their narrative, and then they would give those narratives to their congressmen, and their congressman would take that narrative to the floor.
Bro, that's wild.
It's ridiculous. And anybody who's ever worked on the Hill in any kind of like civilian capacity has literally watched. They're supposed to have a meeting with the senator or the congressman from Idaho, and instead they have a meeting with 4 24-year-olds who are 2 of which are interns, 2 of which are staffers, and they're talking to these 26-year-olds, 24-year-olds about whatever policy agenda is going to get passed. And then those 4 kids are basically like, we got you, dude. And then they go talk to the congressman of Idaho, and then boom, it's done. That's the way our government works.
Wow.
It's a
The
shame.
part that freaks me out is not the youth. What freaks me out is that you've got a group of people basically saying, this is how we want people to think about it, put it together, come up with the words, the angle, all of that. And then now we're going to feed it through the system by going and sitting down with these Congress people, especially now in the age where you hear the media and they'll repeat the same phrase over and over and over like a mindless drone. It is way unnerving. So hearing that, which I was not aware of in terms of how the message was shaped, that's not fun.
That's not fun. And that's been how it's been for a long time. So by the time you and I hear something official from the federal government, it's been shaped for weeks, if not months, by coaches, congressional staffers, and Congress people who agree or disagree or further tune whatever comes out of their staffers' recommendations. Mm-hmm. Now we move at the speed of marketing. So now Donald Trump says something and it's out there. And his staff has to react to what he said on Twitter or what he said on X, right? It's
or truth. How dare you? His stock just dropped.
So there's all this different pacing that's very, very difficult. What does that mean? The reason it's so unnerving to me is because it's more difficult than ever before for Americans to know what is really happening. Mm-hmm. What is somebody actually saying? Are they actually saying what they intend to do? Are they saying something that they've been forced to say? Or are they just trying to save their job? We don't know. It's insane. And it's very, very difficult for any of us to make confident decisions in that landscape. And that is going to be the landscape for many, many years, I would argue for a decade or more, because the precedent has been set. Mm-hmm. The precedent has been set, and it is in favor of the president. So whoever's going to come next and beat Donald Trump, or whoever's going to come after Donald Trump no longer can be running for office, whoever comes next is going to pull from this playbook, because this playbook works. This playbook benefits the president, benefits presidential ambition, benefits the constituent base that votes the president into office. We're not going to see it end anytime soon.
Okay. I want to keep drilling into the actual facts of the case here. So looking at what Tulsi Gabbard is claiming, it seems to hinge on a small handful of things. One, that they knowingly shaped the information, that Obama rejected an initial presentation that, yes, Russia was doing something, but it's really not having any impact. The next piece would be that Trump actively was colluding, that not only was Russia doing this, but Trump was in on it. The Steele dossier was used in the creation of the intel, which they then said, no, that wasn't a big part of it, since that was paid for by Hillary Clinton's team. If all of those things are true, and Obama did know about it, that it was, as you said, malicious information, that they looked at a small subset and then presented it as if this were the whole truth and nothing but the truth. They left out, obviously, the part that's come out in the Durham Annex, which is that Obama knew about it, was briefed that they were using it as a distraction against Hillary's emails. Mm-hmm. Do you think that if those things are true, it would qualify as a coup?
I don't think it would qualify as a coup. And that's because in my worldview, coups are hyper-organized across multiple branches of government. Military, police, intelligence, Internal Revenue Service, like multiple branches are included when you have a successful coup. Not just a leadership coup or a soft coup. That stuff happens in the third world, sort of, only because there's such a strong man in office that once one person tips, everybody just follows suit, but not in the United States. So I would not qualify it as a coup. I will say that it seems reasonable and logical to me that Obama would have known about it, because anything that's happening in the executive branch would have been told to the chief executive. Whether or not he made a mental note of it, whether or not it was on page 200 or page 2 of his president's daily brief, I don't know. But he would have known that there was some element here of, hey, Mr. President, we're seeing Russia participate in this way in trying to shape our elections or interfere with our elections. It looks like this is what we believe they want versus this other thing, whatever else. We had the same thing going into the 2024 elections with Biden, who then turned into Kamala, and Trump again, where people were saying, hey, we see information that suggests China wants X, Russia wants Y, Iran wants this other thing, North Korea wants this third outcome. That's not unfamiliar territory to us. I think the big difference was in 2016, it became front page news. Foreign governments have always tried to participate, have always tried to interfere with our elections. They've always contributed. They've always messed with us.
And presumably we do the same.
Exactly right. That's part of the process. That's part of the game of espionage. You never know how things are going to turn out, but you know that you want things to be so chaotic that the people in the target country don't believe in their own system. The fact that we're having this conversation, the fact that we're seeing what's playing out right now in headlines is just making Russia smile all the way to the bank. Because
Russia, China,
everybody, anybody who's not a democracy is looking at the United States right now and looking at what's going across our headlines and saying that system doesn't work. There are Americans looking at us right now saying our system may not work.
Yeah.
That's the end goal. That's the whole reason that we interfere with elections at all. Not to get a certain person through the finish line, but to make everybody doubt the process.